everybody. Thanks for listening. This is Shane Claiborne, and wow, there's a lot going on in the news. I think a lot of us are asking what it looks like to show moral courage right now, to speak out against injustice in all of its different forms. And you're in for a treat today because my guest has his own vocation as a doctor in the medical community, a doctor, not a doctor of theology, but a real physical body doctor. And because of that, his his love for life and concern for people has taken him to do some really innovative things around gun violence. And we're going to hear all about it. His name is Dr. James Bigham. And we met out in Madison. Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me, Shane.
Yeah, we had this powerful convergence of folks at many different intersections of peacemaking, but certainly gun violence was in the forefront. And you did several presentations, I think, but the one that I saw was a panel of different voices, and it was such a gift to be together. And I thought I've met, there's been a lot of examples of the medical community showing moral courage on gun violence, marching in the streets with the white jackets and the robes or the scrubs and also around the death penalty. I think you and I talked about that. And for a while in North Carolina, it was the medical community that's at least temporarily halted all executions because they said we didn't become doctors to take lives, but we became doctors to try to save lives. And the medical community backed them up in that, the national association saying, yeah, it's a violation of the oath to do no harm. And when we think of gun violence, it's now the number one cause of death of children and youth in America. We stand alone among our peer countries when it comes to just seeing the massive loss of life. It's over 100 lives every single day that are lost to gun violence. In my lifetime, we've seen more lives lost to gun violence than in all the casualties of all of America's wars throughout history combined. So it's very hard to say that we are pro-life or we care about the flourishing of people and ignore gun violence. So thanks, man, for how you're doing that. I think a little backdrop, like I didn't do a real proper intro, but say a little bit more about your medical vocation, because I think it gives you, some real unique kind of credentials and credibility as someone who you don't have much of an agenda other than just trying to save lives.
Yeah, I'm a family physician, so a primary care physician, which means I care for everybody from birth until later in life. And I love that. I love the fact that as a family doc, I get to care for multiple generations. And so the chance to influence the well-being and the health of not only the child, but the parents. And then one of the biggest privileges is when the grandparents sometimes also, join my practice, my panel. And the real focus is about helping people kind of unlock their potential and really being whole and well people. And though I can treat things, really, though it's not glamorous, prevention is paramount. And so if we can get ahead of things, and that's one of the reasons why working on firearm injury prevention is so important to me, is if we can get ahead of it. And we talk about working upstream in the public health world. If we get upstream before the negative consequence occurs, the negative event occurs, we can have a huge impact. In these relationships I'm able to cultivate with patients that last many years, it's a longitudinal chance to interact. There is a chance to build inroads and help people make decisions that are going to align with their values while also having a harm reduction approach. And it's a little bit different than how this often gets talked about. I think when people think, oh, the doctor's coming for my guns, all I'm doing is trying to leverage harm reduction for patients.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that, kind of what it looks like, because I heard you tell a few stories about that too that were really powerful and very personal. Uh, but we need a better conversation about this, and that's why I thought your contribution in that panel was so lovely, because it wasn't just a debate around the Second Amendment, but it was really your very genuine concern for life and well-being that is what fuels you. And one of the things that you talked about that we talk about this a lot in our book, Beating Guns, as well, is that um, suicide is the biggest loss of life when it comes to gun violence. It's not always the first thing we think of. We think of, the mass shootings and, like neighborhoods like mine where we've lost too many lives, and that those are all horrific and tragic. But suicide, sometimes up to two-thirds of the deaths, it's always over half of the deaths are self-inflicted. And the reason that guns are so important is that they don't give you a second chance. Almost everyone that attempts to take their life with a gun ends up not making it through that. But when you look at the data on other methods that people attempt to take their own life, they usually survive, and most of them don't go on to die by suicide. They're able to get help or rethink the crisis that they're in. And so thwarting that first suicide attempt can be really massive in actually saving lives, and you see that firsthand. But there's all kinds of like kind of uncompromising lobbies that have created this confidentiality. No, doctors can't overstep; they can't ask about that. And so talk a little bit about the the mental health and the suicide. It's not the only aspect of gun violence, but because so many lives are at stake and guns are so central, having access to a firearm is so massive. It makes total sense that a doctor would care about that.
Yeah, and to be honest, I didn't have any training on how to talk about firearms with patients in my medical school or residency. And that's not in any way shaming or casting shade on where I had training. That's actually in line with most American medical schools. When the last survey was done, only 25% of medical schools reported out that they had training on how to engage patients and talking about, reducing the risk of harm from firearm. And as you said before, it's the number one cause of death for kids, age 1 to 19 in America. That's a uniquely American thing. And I was drawn into this space because of a mass casualty event when I was first in out of my residency training, when I was first in my first job as an attending physician. And that was Sandy Hook. And when Sandy Hook happened, I thought to myself, I should be trained for everything because I've done medical school, actually have a master's in public health. I've done my residency. And so the world tells you you're ready. And I just felt like I'm not ready for this. And as I began to lean in and try to learn more, I realized I had some significant blind spots with respect to firearms and how they impact our communities. And one of the biggest ones was that mass casualty events, those school shootings, which are horrific and they should be zero, are a really small percent of firearm deaths, like 1% typically annually. In a state like mine, Wisconsin, 70% of firearm deaths are suicides. And so it's it's people with access to a tool that has very lethal means. You hit it exactly on the head, Shane. Firearms are unique in that they have a 90+% fatality rate when used for suicide. The fact that other forms of attempts are more likely than firearms, or used more often than firearms, is interesting because firearms are the preponderance of the deaths that we see as far as suicides. And if someone survives their suicide attempt, we know under 10% of those people will later die by suicide. It might be as low as 5%. I had a blind spot on that when I was in my training. I sort of thought, oh, the person had attempted to take their own life and they've survived. Sort of what maybe they're going to later die by suicide, it was probably a burnout thing. It was a blind spot, and I thought, why are we putting all these resources towards this? Well, actually, the data shows us we should put resources towards these vulnerable patients who are very valuable people, because if we keep them from harming themselves, ending their own lives in that moment with a firearm, they're going to go on and hopefully live a meaningful life after that moment of crisis.
Yeah, and because I mean, this is so real. I can't remember if I told you this story, but it happened right before you and I were together in Wisconsin. And I'm going to tell it without a lot of details, but there was a family therapist that was doing a session with a client and was very concerned about their well-being. They seemed to be very prone to self-harm or suicide. And so, and they knew that this person had a firearm, and they were able to just through that relationship and counseling invite them to hand over that firearm, but didn't know what to do with it, right? Because this is the irony of America. It's easier to get a firearm than to get rid of one. And even that was technically an illegal transfer of firearms. And yet I told this therapist, like, if you'll bring that in, I mean, or I can bring equipment to you, whatever you prefer, but we need to destroy that firearm. And we did that, legally and safely according to regulations. But I said, you very likely could have just saved someone's life. And yet, like, it wasn't even legal, I mean, it was like, it's so hard to like know how to do right when the restrictions are, I mean, there's so much protections of guns that we've been better at protecting guns than human lives. And that's part of the problem that um, so I think there's a lot of folks, even if you look at the data of folks who own firearms, they want to see changes. They want to see people protected. And they don't buy into this unreasonable logic that if they come for our our AR-15s are going to just make all guns illegal or something like that. So I think most gun owners are much more reasonable than we might have them painted by the extremes.
I think your example is a good one of when someone's in a time of crisis, a temporary voluntary transfer might also be an option. That was more of a permanent transfer, but a temporary transfer happens a lot, and people often don't talk about this. And it's important to know the state in which you live and what
Yep.
the laws are. In the state of Wisconsin, it is okay for someone to transfer a firearm to anyone who is able to actually have a firearm. So as long as the person's like not a felon, as long as the person they're going to transfer to could like pass a background check, you can transfer a firearm to that person and they can hold it for you. We also have about 4 dozen local gun shops that no questions asked will hold firearms for as long as the person needs to get through their crisis. And I love
So good.
this idea of we're just trying to stall things out, to get some distance, to get some separation from firearms during that time of crisis, because we know the decision to act can be very impetuous. People can go, just minutes between thinking, I want to do this to acting. And if we can just slow them down and take away the very lethal means, we can absolutely, like you said, we can save lives. It can be life saving. And I've seen
Yeah.
this with my patients where I've encouraged them to think about a voluntary transfer and have some just wonderful stories of people feeling empowered, not judged, to pick someone who could hold their firearms for them, and actually created a bit of a chance to lean in and make more of an emotional connection with their friends and their family. Because when they were honest and vulnerable, there's this moment of people move towards you because they care
Mhm.
about you. And in the moment where you feel isolated and alone, it's really important to make sure that we do surround you with that loving community.
Yeah, I'm going to circle right back to you on a few of those stories. But if you're just tuning in, y'all, the voice you've been listening to is Dr. James Bigham. Became a friend of mine out in Madison when we met up and at a conference that was uh, very comprehensively thinking about peacemaking in the world right now and what it looks like to stand consistently on the side of life. And so James is a uh, physician, family physician. We've been hearing about his concern and really what's beautiful is the concrete things that you've done and that you're training other medical folks to do that can really concretely save lives. Um, One other story that I thought of before we get off the suicide is tragically there was one story in Philadelphia that this fellow contacted us and his wife had taken her life and he actually didn't even know that she had a firearm. And yet his last request for that firearm was that it just be destroyed. He never wanted it to fire again. He never wanted to see it again. He didn't want it put back on the market, which sadly is what often happens in many states, is these guns that go initially into police custody then get sold back onto the market, even guns that were used in mass shootings. I mean, it's mind-boggling. But the detective on that case was like, well, there's not really any question around criminal activity or anything. We don't need the gun. And I talked to him, and he really had a tender heart. And he said, we've never done this before. I've got to run it through a few other folks, but ended up getting the green light, brought that firearm to our shop, and he and I were able to oversee the destruction of that firearm and then to let this person know. I mean, they've already lost enough on top of their grief. They don't need to be thinking about this firearm taking someone else's life. And, in one sense, it didn't bring their loved one back, but it gave one measure of closure to say that, oh, that gun will never shoot again. But to think that like that was such an innovative thing for our police department to think about, and that yet what often is protocol doesn't make any sense, is to just put these back on sale after they've been used. The last shot that they had was ending a life. And so um, it's just so refreshing to hear someone in that medical community. I've got some friends here that are in the ER and stuff, but you're kind of so unique because you what drives you is not just the tragic traumatic events, although you work with those medical folks too, but it's just this, working with kids and with families and folks, and trying to take care of them. So talk just a little bit more about like how this kind of, you said a little bit, but how it got on your radar, and how like you were kind of making the path by doing it. There's not a lot of resources that were there, and thankfully you're trying to help create those for others. But say just a little bit about how you found your way into this. And I know it's been so effective because I heard some of the stories you shared.
Yeah, I have to admit to being a slow learner. So I've never been someone who's been a early adopter, but I found that I am a curious person, and when I feel like I don't have something that I feel like I need, especially when it comes to caring for my patients, fueled by the care I have for them, the love I have for them, it really began a bit of a journey of self-exploration to try to just learn more about firearms and even the culture of firearms in the state of Wisconsin. And through, I think, Providence, had a chance to make a couple of really great connections with some folks who do suicide prevention here in the Madison area, and then was invited actually onto a webinar to talk about suicide prevention with a gun shop owner.
Hmm.
I had never met this person before. And so there I was as the doctor, the family doctor, who everyone's like, oh, this guy's going to be like, take all the guns away and, bury him. And then here's the guy who owns the gun shop and is a gunsmith. And it feels like we're just going to do this the whole time. And instead, we came at this with a very different perspective. We came at it with a perspective of being centered on the individual and on really the value of human life and how can we collaborate to preserve human life. So we took all the politics and set them aside. And we really began this very cool discussion about how can we partner. And it piqued interest in me to realize, wow, I think I might have partners even here in Madison. And then had a friend who connected me with a gun shop just south of Madison. And we began actually doing trainings for healthcare professionals just to demystify firearms, not to glorify them,
Mhm.
but to demystify them so people feel like they have at least a little bit of knowledge to begin having a conversation. Because in medicine, probably like other professions, but in medicine, when you don't really know necessarily what you're talking about, or you're not so sure where it's going to go, sometimes people kind of skip the topic or they'll duck it. And so trying to move towards it so people feel confident in having discussions is what we've worked on. And the training we've done at this local gun shop over the last 3 years, we've had over 250 people trained, and we watch their confidence scores in talking about like screening and counseling patients on how to reduce their risk of harm from firearm. It's pretty astounding. Coming in, less than 50% of folks feel confident having these conversations. After a 2-hour training, 95% say they feel confident having these conversations. 100% of folks would recommend the training. And the point of this isn't to glorify guns or to vilify them. It's really just to come at this with that curiosity and to move towards patients. Because for some patients, the right choice is going to be absolutely, I'm going to get these firearms out of my house. I want to either like sell them, destroy them, whatever. For others, it's actually, hey, this is my hunting rifle. I just make sure my kid doesn't get access to it. For the 50 weeks of the year, I'm not using it because our deer rifle season's only 2 weeks. And so sometimes people just have a blind spot or just a lack of awareness. They think it's not going to happen to them. And we don't want to use scare tactics, but we do want to move towards them and help them really recognize where there might be risk. Because it's the very people they want to actually save or protect the most who are going to benefit, their kids and their family.
Yeah, and I mean there is a framework for thinking about this that we talk about other things like opioids and other addiction is, harm reduction, right? And so we
We talk,
like
I mean, I
yeah,
talk about car seats, water
yeah.
safety, all these things. In 2018-19, firearms eclipsed motor vehicle crashes as the number one cause of death for kids. And so when I'm lecturing, I say, if you're talking about car seats and seatbelts and not texting and driving, but you're not actually talking about firearms and ammo, you're not hitting the number one topic. And
So good.
it's to help
It's
people just expand their thinking on this.
I mean, yeah, and it's actually a really helpful and accurate metaphor because you think like cars aren't meant to be deadly, but they can be. And so we've done so many things to try to
We've shifted
ensure
culture.
people's safety. Yeah,
We've
you have
shifted
to
culture.
pass a test to show that you can drive one. If you abuse the right, then you can lose your license. Like there's accountability, there's technology, the airbags and seat belts and stuff have changed to try to make people safer. And yet, like the guns are one of the most unevolved industries and there's so little accountability. Even the founders, put the well regulated in there for a reason, so I think that there's a lot of the good news is that there's a lot of gun owners that, if you, for instance, when you ask people if you've been convicted of domestic violence, do you think you should be able to access firearms? Because we know that's one of the lights on the radar. It's a good indicator. If you've hurt someone in your family, you're likely to either kill someone in your family or kill someone else. And so there's, all those things. But yeah, as I was thinking about the harm reduction, though, in my neighborhood, we're in the kind of eye of the storm of opioids. So we have safe deposit places where people can put needles.
Yeah.
And no one's wanting folks to use drugs, right? I mean, this is not an endorsement of but it's going harm reduction is a good thing. Needle exchanges and things like there's things that we want to do to try
It,
to have steps towards health.
I think we need to take a practical or a pragmatic approach, not an absolutist one.
Yeah.
And
And I
so,
mean, and similar to that, we give out free gun locks, free gun boxes. We offer free firearm safety classes, all that within our work. Even though I personally don't own a firearm, I have a license to carry and I know how to use one because we are handling them all the time. And I grew up with guns. But we want neighbors to be safe, and it's that access to firearms that is just so dangerous that I mean the data shows over and over a gun in the house is more likely to kill someone that you love, either by accident or self-inflicted or a kid finding it in the home or something if we don't take the real measures to make sure that we honor how powerful this instrument is.
yeah, it's a really powerful tool, a lot like motor vehicles, right? And car ownership and gun ownership are uniquely American things. If you actually look at us compared to other countries, we do that at a much higher rate in other countries.
Yeah.
And because of the volume, it also means we need to be mindful about how we can put things in place to reduce the risk of harms.
I want to make sure folks hear about some of the training you're doing because you've been on your own journey, but now you're resourcing lots of other folks. I want to make sure folks know where to find some of that. But any other stories you want to share about just how you've seen this very innocent, like I mean it's very not, I almost want to say pastoral, but it's doctoral too. It's your medical backdrop, but you're as you're walking with folks, any other stories of how you've just been able to ask some honest questions and maybe protect other lives.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it kind of being pastoral. I mean, in so many ways, the being a physician is a calling to be a healer.
Mm, mm.
And so there is this element of really trying to lead with that posture of really care and wanting what's best for the person in front of me, no matter what it is we're talking about. And I just normalized the conversations. And in Wisconsin, almost half of homes have firearms. And so it's a really just normal question I'll ask, along with other things like tobacco use or alcohol, et cetera. And what I really enjoy doing is just getting to learn from the patients a bit more about how I can help them maybe close a gap or see where they have a bit of a potential risk. And I care for all sorts of folks, and so I have individuals who have like won shooting awards. I have individuals who have former military experience or have been in law enforcement. And I don't shy away from those conversations. And sometimes it's interesting, the folks maybe who even use firearms vocationally maybe have a small little blind spot on things like how you secure your ammunition and things like that. And we just come right back to, I care about you and your family. Both of us have a shared value here, which is we don't want harm to come your way. And I'm not trying to scare you, but what we want to do is just plan safe. We want to make
Yeah.
sure that we have things in place to prevent the risk of harm. And I've done a lot of training also for my colleagues, not only where I work, but in the other health systems in this town. And I take great joy when I get a message from a colleague who says, "Hey, James, I did it. I
Mm.
talked to somebody today and they had a risk and we did some work together to change that." And I send them back a note all the time and say, "Hey, way to go. I'm like your biggest fan. You may have saved a life today."
Yeah.
And I love
So
that. I
good.
love this multiplier effect of I don't want to keep the things I've learned. And I am not the best at this. It's something that, though I realize needs to be integrated into the work that we do as primary care physicians, I love the idea of being able to evangelize my colleagues to say, hey, this is important work we can do. It can be life-saving. Maybe it's scary, but we do hard things every day. And when I hear my colleagues are having success, that's awesome. We actually did training for a behavioral health team because those are the folks who are on the front lines all the time.
Yeah.
And so they now can give out cable locks. I love it when one of our therapists walk into my office and says, "Hey, I gave out, 3 locks today. I gave out 10 locks today." I'm like, "That's awesome. Every single one of those, I hope, is used. And I hope that it is going to reduce the risk of harm for the people that we're caring for."
Yeah, man. And you said 250 folks that or you've done these trainings. Say a little bit more about is some of that available online for folks that want to see it? Is it just for your medical community? Or I'm also thinking of other folks. I mean, I know a ton of different groups that are doing kind of front lines work in neighborhoods. Like we got a medical clinic on our block right here, Esperanza Health Center. So there's, I think, like 400 staff or something there. But like, are there other ways that what you're doing might inspire folks to do it right where they are?
Yeah, so I think what we're doing is absolutely scalable. What
Hmm.
we've done is really tried to show that this can work, and it's been like hyper local. We're working to expand it elsewhere in the state as well as a couple places out of state. But what I would say, Shane, is I'm happy to be a resource, and I'm happy
Great.
to talk to anybody who wants to talk about this. Not that my ideas are the best, but I'd love to collaborate. I love to learn from others about what they're doing because if we can share our successes and create something better together, that'd be amazing. And so I'd be really happy to have folks reach out to talk more about even envisioning how could we do it better or differently, or if you've got something that's going really well where you are, I want to learn about it because we've got gains to make on this. We're not all the way there yet.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, any other ways that folks could, so we'll make sure that folks that reach out to us can connect with you, but other places people can find you. Are you on socials or online or any of the resources you have on a website?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And then other than that, as a physician, I have kind of a low profile, just for various reasons. I want to be available to my patients, but I'm not like all over, TikTok, and I'm not trying to like be a influencer or things like that at this point, but I want to be available. Absolutely. And so folks can reach out to you to get in touch with me or hit me up on LinkedIn. That's a great way to connect. And then,
So great.
and then I also just want to say that when I when I think about this, I also think what I'm doing as a physician is a lot like what a pastor can and should be doing.
Mm.
And I think just like physicians have had a blind spot on talking about firearms, when I talk to clergy and to pastors, I think sometimes they too feel like, I don't know, it's too personal, it's too political. And I kind of feel like physicians, like pastors, we talk about everything with our people, you know? So really
Yeah.
nothing should be, I think nothing should be off limits. We should make sure we have a really good posture. We need to show up and show love. We need to make sure that we're being really culturally humble as we're approaching that person, not judgmental. But I think there's some real gains to be had here, and we shouldn't fear reprisal. If we do this right, people are going to feel like they're getting care, and it should feel like an act of love. And I'm excited. Next week I have a chance to talk with some pastors here in town about how we might begin to do some training for pastors, a lot like what I've been doing for physicians. I'm sure
So great.
I'm
Yeah.
sure there are other fields where this is relevant as well, but we just want to let this thing grow just naturally and see where it goes. And if we can save a life, just one, that's success. I'm
Yeah.
confident as we're able to have this multiplier effect as each person is in these conversations and just has an awareness of, hey, maybe I should or I can ask when they have that sense that something's going on. That's going to make a big impact. There is no law that exists in this country that says you cannot, as a physician, ask about firearms. It's within the purview, harm reduction, wellness. It's within the purview of the physician. And so, absolutely, asking those questions is important. I don't know the laws about clergy. I would imagine they're pretty similar. I think you're allowed to have meaningful conversations with your congregations, especially
Yeah,
as it pertains to
absolutely.
trying to keep families and folks who might be in crisis healthy.
And I think even of parents, right? If your kids are going over to someone's house to play.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I can remember in elementary school, I had a friend who shot and killed his best friend. They
Hmm.
were playing. They were
Oh, I'm so
playing
sorry.
like yeah. I mean, they were playing a game, and it was like on the mantle or something, like antique firearm, I think, and yet it was loaded. And so, yeah, I mean, those stories. We can't save every life, but we can do a lot better sometimes just by asking questions. I mean, most of us probably don't send our kids over to folks' house. I mean, I can remember also going to people's house where they had like alcohol just in reach, and you're like, yeah, I don't think you want your like 15-year-old like stay, so
Yeah.
just think of this like we're just trying to be responsible. We're trying to as Dorothy Day said, make an environment where it's easier to be good. We're just trying to make it easier for people to be healthy and unharmed. And so if your kids are going over to someone's house, like even just asking, I'm not judging you if you have a fire. I'm just making sure it's locked and safe. If our kids are going to be playing without my supervision there, or like you said, pastors, social workers. I think especially of those in the Christian world. I mean, there's the Christian the Christian Healthcare Association around the country. There's medical clinics. There's all kinds. So I hope that the work that you're doing can encourage and inspire other folks. And so grateful for you, Dr. James Bigham. I hope this is the first of many chances we get to collaborate, man. But so grateful for you.
Thank you for having me. This was a great time.